Error outputs let you specify one of three actions for the data flow pipeline in response to a problem in a row. You can configure any of these three options when a row causes an error. The first is to ignore the failure. The row is effectively lost from the data flow pipeline, and the component continues processing as if no problem occurred. Use this option with caution. Losing rows could compromise data integrity at the destination. Second option is to redirect row. The data flow transformation sends the row to an alternate error output, splitting it off into its own pipeline. This output functions the same as any output from a data flow transformation. You can use other transformations to write the error rows to a log file, or maybe even repair the rows and return them to the main data flow pipeline. And then the third option is to fail the component. The transformation fails when it encounters an error row. This option is useful to identify potential issues when you build and debug a package, but it's less likely that you would want failures in a production environment. However, you can allow component failures in a data flow, so long as you catch the errors and properly process the errors within the control flow. Now I'm going to show you how you can configure the error outputs from a data conversion transformation to redirect rows with bad data to an alternate destination. The data flow is going to use data from the AdventureWorks 2012 product table and attempts to convert data in the color field to a different type that is invalid for roughly half of the rows. So I'll start by creating a package that fails because of data conversion errors, and then explore some of the ways that you can use error outputs to make the package more robust when handling bad data. So I'll create the new project, and this time I'll call it Error Outputs. And I'll rename the package the same thing, Error Outputs. Okay, so everything that's going on in this package is going to be in the data flow, so I'll double-click that and put that in the control flow and open up the data flow designer. All right, so I need an OLEDB data source, so I'll come down here to Other Sources, drag that onto the data flow, and double click on it to open up the editor. And I don't have any connections created yet, so I need to create a new one. So I have one for AdventureWorks LT 2012, but I need one for the AdventureWorks 2012 database. So I'll select New. I'm going to use the local server and select AdventureWorks 2012, and this would work with AdventureWorks 2014 as well. I'll test the connection, all is well, and OK, and I'll select that connection. All right, I'm going to access a table or a view, and in this case I want the production.product table. All right, so let's preview the data. There's up to the first 200 rows of it. And for this example, I'm going to be particularly interested in the color field here. So notice that there are a lot of null colors. Apparently there's a lot of products that just don't have a color, which kind of makes sense. I don't know what an adjustable race is, some part of a bicycle apparently, but it doesn't have a color. But a crank arm get those in black. There's chainring bolts in silver and in black there, and so forth. So that's the nature of the data in the color column that we're going to be working with. All right, keep in mind this is just the first 200 rows, so there's a lot of null values, but there's a lot of colors there as well. All right, so I'll close that, and then click on OK, because we've configured the OLEDB data source. Now I'm going to use the transformation. I'm going to use the conversion transformation, data conversion transformation here. I'll drag that onto the form and connect the data flow arrow there. And then I need to convert this data conversion. All right, because I connected this to that OLEDB source, it has available all of the metadata about the data flow, what's going to be coming from that product table from the AdventureWorks 2012 database. All right, so I want to work with the color field here, so I'll select that in the box. And I want to change the output alias to name this cint color, because I want to convert the color to integers for whatever reason. And then I need to change the data type to an integer type, and I'll use a 4-byte signed integer. 4-byte signed integer right there. I can widen that a bit more to see what it actually is. DT14 looks good. Okay, so that's all I need this data conversion transformation to do. I'll click on OK, and it's now configured. Okay, then I need a placeholder for where this data is going to go to. So I am going to use a data reader destination. Let's come down here to Other Destinations and a data reader destination. And I'm just going to use this as a surrogate destination because I don't want to save this data anywhere for this exercise. In a real package, of course, I would want to save the data someplace. All right, and I'll connect up the data conversion data flow with that destination. All right, I'll select this, and there is one thing that I need to change in that object. I need to change the read timeout. So I'm going to set that to 0. And that just avoids a delay when running the package. Again, if I was really using a data reader to write this data to an ADO.NET data reader, I wouldn't want to change that timeout. It's just so that because I'm using it as a placeholder, I don't want that 30-second delay in executing the package while it waits for that timeout to happen. Okay, so there's my beginning package. I'll go ahead and execute it. And you can see that the data conversion task here failed. Now, the reason it failed is because, as I showed you before, the color column consists of a mix of null values and string color names, things like black and silver. The null values convert successfully, oddly enough, but the transformation can't convert strings to integers. And so that shows the default behavior when there's a problem with input data. The package chokes and execution immediately stops. Okay, and if you want to, you can get more information down here in the output window. So you can see there's all kinds of warnings. The warnings are all saying that such and such not subsequently used in the data flow task. To make things more efficient, you can remove that from the output. Okay, so I don't care about those. And then we get down here to the errors. Data conversion failed while converting column color to column cint color. The conversion returned status value 2 and status text. The value could not be converted because of a potential loss of data. So that's the specific kind of error that occurred with this package in that data conversion. Okay, so I'm going to go back up here into data conversion. And now I want to make use of this configure error output option right down there. That opens up this configure error output dialog box. So notice that the component is configured by default, because I haven't changed anything yet, to fail the component both when an error and data truncation occur. Okay? So it just fails the component. That's why it immediately executes the first time there's any kind of an error. So not a very robust way of handling data errors, because there may be millions of rows in that input table that I need to work with, and it's going to be pretty tedious to solve errors one by one by one by one. Okay, so what I can do is I can select both of these options by clicking on it and holding down the control key. And then I can select down here to ignore the failure and apply it, and that's going to apply to both of those. That's just a real quick and easy way of making multiple changes, because I may have multiple columns here that I need to do some sort of action on. But I also could have selected these individually and made the changes directly like that. Okay, so now it's going to ignore the failure. Click on OK and click on OK. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to enable the data viewer on this data flow right there. So we'll be able to see the data that's coming out of data conversion because it's now going to ignore the error. And so I'm going to get rows out of that component. Previously, how I had everything configured, first row that it choked on, it choked the entire package. That's now changing. Okay, so I'm going to execute the package again. Starts executing. And there's the data viewer. So I can move this over a little bit. Whoops, didn't really want to do that. Poor mouse control today. Let me just make that a little smaller so we can see our package behind there. And as you can see, the data conversion succeeded and the data reader succeeded as well. So the package is executed to completion. But now notice that the rows that were processed were 504. Okay, so if I scroll this all the way over and then widen it a little bit, it's not the easiest dialog box to work with, and then double click on that to widen the column. There we go. Now we can see the result of cint color. Okay, so if we scroll down this 504 rows, notice that cint color is only null. Well, that's kind of strange because we have null values in color, but they're not all null values. Some of them should have converted. So there we have nulls, black and silver, silver there, silver, black, red, black, white, multi, as though multi was a color. Okay, so why did we get all null values for cint color? Well, this may or may not be the result that you want. So what happened here is that null values converted successfully and it converted to a null. So it really didn't convert anything, but it didn't cause the data conversion component to fail. When it came across a string that it couldn't convert to an integer, then the data conversion failed. I configured the component to ignore the error, and the result then of cint color is no result, which in SQL Server, of course, is a null value. And so that's why everything within cint color is null. So again, this may or may not be what you want. It's valid results, but it may or may not be what you want. But there's other ways to handle this. All right, so I'll close that and end package execution. So another better way of handling this is to redirect the row with data problems to another transformation or a destination. But first, you have to tell the data conversion transformation to redirect rows instead of ignoring the failure. So I need to go back into data conversion, back into configure error output, and then here change this to redirect row. And I'll do it both for error conditions as well as truncation. But I could do them differently. If I wanted to ignore truncations, no problem. I could just ignore the error. Okay, so I've changed that configuration. And so now it's going to redirect any problem rows. But notice that I have a warning icon. If I hover over it, it says rows sent to the error outputs will be lost. Add new data flow transformation or destinations to, and I can't read the whole thing, so I need to view errors. Okay, there I can see the whole thing. Add new data transformations or destinations to receive the error rows. So this is arising. I'm getting this warning because I'm not using the error output yet. Or reconfigure the component to stop redirecting rows to the error outputs. Okay, so I'm going to do the former. I'll get rid of that. Okay. So I'm going to use another data reader transformation for that, or data reader destination for that. I'll stick that over there. And I'll connect this error output to that destination. As you can see, that causes this Configure Error Output dialog box to open. Now, I've already configured these settings. It's going to redirect the row, and so I'm just going to click OK to close that. And then I also want to come into the properties for this data reader destination and change that to 0. Again, just so there's no delay in running the application. All right, I also want to enable a data viewer on this flow so we can see the data that is output there. Okay, so I'll go ahead and execute the package again. I'll move these out of the way for the moment. In fact, sure, I'll put them on top of each other. Okay, and so I can now look at, I'll move these more out of the way, and you can see that I read all the data successfully, but we're still processing data. Okay? What's most interesting here is that 256 rows are going to the error output destination, and 248 rows are going to the destination for the successful transformations. Okay, so now we can explore this data. So here's the data conversion error output. So as you can see here, these are all the colors that have strings. If I scroll down the whole thing, there's not a null in sight. If I widen this a bit, I can go all the way to the right, and you can see that we get errors, error code, an error column to identify which column it is, and then an error value description. If I widen that out, value cannot be converted for reasons other than sign mismatch or data overflow. Not real useful kind of error message, but at least it gives you some indication of what's going on. So again, because this is an error output, the data flow added these 3 additional columns with information. And notice that C in color doesn't appear here because it wasn't able to create C in color. Okay, now I'm going to go over to the data viewer for the successful conversions. So as you can see here, all these colors are null because those are the only values that could be successfully converted. And then I can scroll over to the right and see that all the C int colors are null as well because null converts to null. Okay, so I'll go ahead and detach these, and I'll close the windows, and you can see that the package executed to completion. Again, 256 error rows, 248 successful conversions.